Hey guys, this is another episode of Hammercircuit. Today we're going to be talking about anxiety and the causes of it. Alright, let's get started, shall we, Carter?
Let's get into it. So the first thing, we need to identify what anxiety actually is. What do you think anxiety is, Michael?
Okay, so I have figured out the definition of anxiety using my trusty device called a smartphone. According to my trusty smartphone, anxiety is defined as a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease. Now the key word is unease. Unease about what? I would say that it's unease about the future. It's a uncertainty, that is. You see, the world has two things. It has things that are going to definitely happen, and then things that may or may not happen, like the weather. We have not figured out, as of now, as of the airing of this episode, how to 100% predict the weather. Right?
I suppose so. But really what it comes down to is, with anxiety, from the definition that you're going off of, and I'm assuming that everybody else is going off of, is that it's pretty much just unease about, it's just I think a level of it goes into uncertainty, like you said, but it's the comfortability of the individual with that uncertainty. Is that a word, comfortability? Contentment. It's the level of one's inner content with the uncertainty that faces them. Because we all face uncertainty, but we vary in the levels of contentment with that uncertainty.
Well, we all, and with varying levels of contentment, we face varying levels of uncertainty, you know, whether it may be a job application, a interview, a result of a video game, or a result of a test. There's always a certain level of uncertainty that varies from activity to activity or action that we perform.
Right, and of course it's interesting though, because of course things like job interviews or applying for a job or anything big like that, a performance, public speaking, those things are naturally going to get you nervous and cause some anxiety. And that's completely natural. That's our defense mechanism. That's how our biology tells us to, hey, are you sure you want to do this? You might die if you do it.
Yeah, it's the trademark fight or flight response.
Exactly. And it's interesting because people also vary with their contentment based on those specific things that they're doing. So when you're going in for a job interview, for me, job interviews aren't scary. Like I haven't had too many job interviews, but I've done plenty of public speaking before. So it's not a big deal for me. I don't really sweat. My heart doesn't pound when it comes to a job interview. But others might be scared to death by a job interview. And that's when it comes to the contentment for the activity. Is that even that's the right word I'm thinking of? Right?
Yeah,
contentment?
Guys and gals, if contentment's a word, or if it's not a word, could you please make sure to leave a comment in the description?
We're not smart enough, guys.
Leave a comment, because we might not be using the right word choice, so we don't know.
Never know. But you get what I'm saying here, right? People have different varying levels of how comfortable they are with a certain activity that they're doing. Now, it's only problematic when they can't function normally in life.
Yeah, when it leads to a sort of decision paralysis, where they're worrying so much that they can't really do it's where it causes procrastination, and they're unable to do the activity, and it interferes with their daily life.
And you wrote a paper about this a few days ago. You can check it out on Medium. We'll post a link in the description below.
It'll be on the Hammercircuit blog later today.
You can check it out. Feel free to. I recommend it. It's a great blog. But really what it comes down to is there's some people that there's always something to worry about. And you also go on to describe in the blog relating to anxiety, the only thing you can really confirm 100% that is going to get done is your actions, because you get to decide on that. But there is a large possibility, there's a large variance of outcomes that can result in the action that you take. And that large variance can cause a lot of anxiety for people.
Yeah, it could cause a lot of fear and worry for a lot of people. Yeah, so I mean, whether that might be, you know, like the example stated before, you know, whether that might be an interview or a test result, you know, it really matters about also your preconceived notions about it. If you've been like conditioned from birth to always like try to get the best score possible, you're gonna have way more anxiety about a test score than someone who is just trying to do their best and like that's it. They just want to get through it.
Right. Now, what's interesting, I say the word interesting way too much, but it's all right.
It's fine.
I'm sure the audience doesn't mind too much. Some of them might, though. Just bring a little humor and uplift this a little bit. Anxiety is a depressing topic.
It is.
But it's weird to see different generations tackle anxiety, because in the past, you think of the greatest generation with World War II, them storming Normandy Beach. You think about that, and they must have been full of anxiety. There's no way they wouldn't have. They're storming a beach facing machine gun fire. They're going to be anxious. That makes sense. But they coped with it differently in comparison to our modern generation. What is it? Millennials and our generation, which is Generation Z.
Well,
so,
the thing is, that was an actual fight or flight response, because you're facing death.
Mm-hmm.
Now the fight and flight response is applied to things that you're not necessarily facing death, but sometimes it feels like it.
Which brings in that's so bizarre to me, because you look at our modern day life and there's nothing that's literally threatening, or at least for most of us, there's nothing that's literally threatening our life. It's not like if you get a C on a test, you're going to have your head chopped off by ISIS. That's...
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
there's a
or at least in America.
There's a huge difference between getting your head chopped off and getting a C on a test.
Yeah, it's not like if I get a C on a test, of course I'm going to be disappointed, or maybe a little anxious to take a test, but it's not anything near running directly into machine gun fire, storming a beach full of Nazis. Like, nothing that's nowhere near that level. It's like getting a C on a test is here. Nazi fire is like higher.
No,
than here.
It's right here.
I can't. Yeah,
it's right here.
You see how you can't see his hand anymore because it's off the screen? That's where it is, and it's probably even higher than that if you can imagine. So,
yeah,
really, but it's weird because it seems in the past, at least, that people had less of it, or it wasn't as much of an epidemic is a proper way to describe it, as what it is today. Yet we don't face the same level of activities that would cause anxiety.
It's gonna get a little bit touchy in the sense that, let's put it this way: you might know the statistics, but like the amount of antidepressant, anti-whatever usage in regards to that, it has increased a lot over the past couple of years. I think it's
gone up 80%, the prescription of antidepressant medication.
And that's specifically in America.
Yeah, specifically in America. And I just don't quite understand, because it brings up a few scenarios. If we're facing less direct threats, like what we were talking about before, why is anxiety seeming to increase?
Well, it's because one theory I have personally is that the American culture is kind of built upon doing things as quickly as possible. You know, you have it's the industrial, one of the reasons is industrial revolution and like mass manufacturing lines. You're constantly pushing out products as fast as you can and stuff to make the biggest amount of profit possible. So it's a lot more viable for them to put a worker on like a pill like Adderall or whatever, and then send them back to work. type
And
of
it's
thing.
crazy too. You can watch documentaries where there's people literally, there's children, 5-year-olds being prescribed Adderall, and it really shows it's possible that we're over-diagnosing people with issues. So, and that is a good theory right there. The rushed culture, especially with our technology these days, it just everything, we're connected to everything in an instant. Before, like for instance, with the North Korean missile,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say it's a crisis, but we're threatened by North Korea and their missiles. Okay, that's like an actual thing. But if you were to think maybe even just like 20 years ago, we wouldn't know too much about it, in all honesty, if we didn't have phones.
We wouldn't, though it would cause anxiety for a couple of people, but not as many people as
Our
it
government
would
officials,
now.
really. Government officials would be anxious, but the average Joe probably wouldn't, because they wouldn't be connected to that. Now, I'm not saying it's bad to be connected to current events. Like, it's a good thing, obviously, to stay informed. But staying informed has its consequences, and those consequences being you being concerned. You don't have a circle of influence. Your circle of, well, you do have a circle of influence. I'm saying this wrong. Your circle of influence is smaller than your circle of concern. So you really don't have the time in your day to be concerned about every single little thing. So when you're having your brain flooded with current events, which constantly involve, you get like the transgender issue, you get the Korean issue, you get the whole Russia thing going on, you get all these different things, and it's so many things in your brain that occupy your mind. And then in your actual life, you have to like worry about getting gas for your car, getting a good education, getting a degree or whatever, finding a good job, healthcare. You worry about these things, and then alongside of all these current events, it causes a ton of anxiety. And I think that could also be a part of it, and it fits alongside of our rushed culture.
I'm feeling anxiety right now from all the stuff that you listed. That was my attempt at a joke. This is a very, very serious topic, just letting you guys know. Getting back to what you said, yeah, you have the stuff that doesn't really directly affect you, and then the stuff that does, but you're being flooded with more stuff that doesn't affect you than the stuff that is actually affecting you on a daily basis. And when the stuff that affects you on a daily, the stuff that actually directly affects you, when that hits, that causes a little bit more anxiety, because your mind has probably been preoccupied with more non-really directly stuff. There's an information overload that we're dealing with the advent of new 21st century technology. Yeah.
So, but then that brings up another question. This is really difficult to say. Mm-hmm. Before I address this, I want to give the more libertarian perspective on this whole issue right here. And I'm not a libertarian. I'm not supporting or condemning libertarianism. This is just a perspective that I personally agree with, and I think Michael would also agree.
Okay.
I don't know how to function my own life so efficiently to where I make zero flaws. As a matter of fact, no one does. We all make mistakes, and nobody's perfect. And this isn't a Hannah Montana song. That's just reality. Okay?
Yeah.
So if we don't know how to function our own lives perfectly, who's to say that we know how to function another person's life? In other words, I don't believe that I have the right to say somebody should or shouldn't be doing another thing, and I believe they have the right to decide what to do for themselves. But that being said, even having that perspective, I really do question people when they say that they have anxiety or depression or something along those lines, because it could very well be that they don't have an actual biological issue with them, and it's environment. Because when you think of depression, usually it's clinical depression, which is caused by, it's in your genes. Mm-hmm. Whether it be a recessive or a dominant gene, there are actual genes that correlate with depression and anxiety. But you see so many people these days that are on pills, that are on, antidepressants and SSRIs, it makes you really wonder, do these people really need it? Or are they just being overloaded with information? Or are they just stressed out? Or do they have no coping mechanisms to deal with these things?
Right.
Or maybe just the slightest little bit of an anxiety these days. Instead of just encouraging people to push through it, we just encourage pills instead.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on
Well,
this?
so I'll push my own little disclaimer. As far as I think you can agree with this as well. I haven't been put on pills ever, like in my whole entire life. Neither have you, I believe, right?
Nope. Never.
Me and Carter, we've both gone through some tough things. Obviously, that's subjective. You can say, "Oh, you haven't gone through anything as bad as I have, or whatever." And maybe you're right. I honestly don't know. The human suffering is also in itself very subjective. It has to do with how you perceive it as well. I think with the pills thing and everything, there's two modes of thinking with the world. There's the Western philosophy and medicine that we have, and then we have the Eastern philosophy and medicine. Eastern philosophy lends itself to a more logical, rational, patient way of doing it. Some Western philosophy does it as well, but it highly stresses on looking inward and facing the problems head on, rather than with Western medicine and stuff. Some Western, you have what is called big pharma. You might hear that term thrown around in news. Look at the EpiPen, for example. That has been raised in price by quite a bit.
Over 100%.
Over 100%. And it has nothing to do with manufacturing cost whatsoever. It has to do with the person who owns either the patent to it or something.
Yeah, it's a monopoly on the industry.
And he's just doing a monopoly on the industry.
It's a monopoly on the industry, so they can raise the price, and since people need it, they have to pay the price. Otherwise, they can't get it.
So, from my perspective, now this may seem a little bit cynical, but some of the doctors in America, I think, as well, in addition with insurance and stuff, they're pushing the pills down because it turns a consistent profit, basically, because they have to keep coming back. There's withdrawal if you get off of those pills, and it's pretty bad. It's a drug. It manipulates your brain chemistry.
That's a very good point. I would have even thought about that if you didn't bring it up. But yeah, people who sell those pills, Big Pharma, they make a lot of money off of it. And it also goes this way with opioids. Every single year, we spend about 80%. I'm saying this wrong again, but we use about 80% of the world's opioid supply. America alone. So we're clearly overusing them, but why? It would be answered by Big Pharma making money off of selling us these types of drugs. And that also applies to SSRIs and these antidepressants like Prozac, Xanax, list goes on from there. And if they make so much money off of these medicines, and somebody comes in and says, "Yeah, doc, I was feeling a little bit anxious the other day, and my heart was thumping and such," well, the doctor would have an incentive to give away pills, and
because they're gonna get, the doctor might not necessarily be
profit
paid, but
from
someone's
it.
gonna profit from it.
And also considering, this is another thing that I've heard from doctors personally. For every 1 hour of work they do with patients, they have to do about 2 hours of paperwork that they have to send to governments, insurance companies, list goes on from there. If somebody comes in and just wants pills or doesn't really have an issue, they just went in to see the doctor for not a big issue, the doctor doesn't want to feel like they're wasting their time, so they could just feel the urge to prescribe pills just so their paperwork that they have to do isn't entirely meaningless.
And we're not necessarily,
these aren't conclusions.
We're not necessarily saying that the medical or medicinal sector of America is corrupted, but you have to admit that certain parts of it may very well be. Not only that, it's it's not always where there's a clear distinction between what is clinically described as a disorder and what very well be a lack of developed coping mechanisms.
I agree. And also that the people that should be suggesting the coping mechanisms, instead of suggesting those, they just suggest the pills, like what we said with the doctors and such. And another thing, I don't like to go down this road because it's a very touchy subject. A lot of the stuff we're discussing is a touchy subject. But I don't like to go down this road because it's belittling an entire generation of people, which I don't like, because I don't like generalizations. Like, whenever I hear they or them, they, them in a sentence to describe somebody or a group of people, it's like, who's they, who's them? You have to be more specific. I don't like generalizing people. Okay, it's just rude. But I know the but kind of just negates everything I just said, but in reality, I just want people to observe and consider this as a possibility. This is just a hypothesis. It isn't a conclusion. Is it possible that we have raised, or I don't know who it would be, but people have been raised with a mentality of weakness? Instead of toughing things out, I guess you could say, they've been raised with a mentality of weakness, where as soon as they have the slightest psychological or mental or physical issue, they go in to see a doctor, or they go into counseling or therapy because they haven't been taught to tough it out on their own. Is that a possibility?
I feel like it might very well be, because there has kind of been a potential there has been an increase in new circumstances, new opportunities to take a much more easier path, and a lot of people, they kind of do take it. They don't. You can see this in many fields. One example of this is academia. The way public schools, or at least in America, works is that they have this new, they had this thing called the No Child Left Behind Act, basically, and it kind of made it where you don't even have to tough it out. They'll wait for you. They'll wait for you to catch up, type of thing. The thing is that not every single human brain is wired exactly the same, and we all learn things at different rates and in different ways. Schools cannot try to do it where they have three different. I read in a book once. There's three different types of learning: auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. There is no way that a school would triple the amount of classes that they offer to accommodate for all types of learning styles.
That's a good point.
That means that there are people who just fall behind because they can't learn the way that the teachers are teaching, basically. And what they're not said, hey, you can tough it out or whatever. They're put into supplementary classes that are for the people who have learning disabilities, and that might not actually be the case. They might just learn at a different pace.
Yeah, that's true. Education could very well play a significant role in the mentality of a generation, whether or not if it's a good or bad education. But it makes me think, because of course some people need counseling, they need therapy, and I think the increase of it over time from the early 20th century up until now, to where therapy is like more common, at least, I think that's a positive, because there's probably more people that needed it that didn't receive it back in the day, I guess you could say. But I have a feeling I don't like it being normalized. That's the only thing I don't enjoy.
I think the main goal of therapy, and I might be wrong, maybe it is the main goal already. I think the main goal of therapy should be to get off of therapy as soon as possible, basically. To be where, yes, you have your psychiatrist or whatever, or your therapist, yes, you have your psychiatrist and therapist, but it slowly transitions to where they are slowly building a therapist and psychiatrist in your head that you can a sequence of steps to deal with those things by yourself. They build up those new coping mechanisms for you, so eventually you get to the point where you don't need to see the therapist or psychiatrist.
I also feel that brings up another point, because wouldn't there be an incentive to make sure that they keep coming back?
Yeah, there would be an incentive.
Yeah, see, there's incentives.
So there's all these incentives. You can profit off of people's anxiety, and obviously there are some people who definitely do that.
And that's like a joke that's commonly made about counselors.
That's the capitalist joke. That's the capitalist joke of it all.
Yeah,
honestly.
and counselors too. You see some of them, they'll see that kids don't have any issues, or that people don't have any issues. Maybe they're just not a busy person in general. Well, if you're not a busy person in general, you need business somehow. So sometimes you have to create your own business. They could say, if they could go to kids, and this is just another hypothesis, there's no conclusions here, and guys, just keep that in mind. But they could go to kids and say, if you have this emotion, you need to talk to somebody about it. Well, that may not necessarily be true. And that could, which also leads to a hypothesis I have. I feel the word anxiety has just been kind of skewed over time, to where it used to be taken away. When you said you have anxiety, that means you have a doctor's note that says that you are like, you've been diagnosed that you have a disorder that causes you to be incapable of functioning normally due to you being worried about the uncertainty of the future.
Let's put it another way. Disorder means it is something that is happening at a irregular interval, which means that it's happening at moments where it shouldn't actually happen. So when you have an anxiety disorder, I mean,
think word-wise, order is something predictable. It's happening at a certain time. In this case, it would be before a job interview, but while you're being attacked, something like that would cause a fight or flight reaction. Disorder is the opposite of that, meaning there is no order. You could be eating a pineapple, and suddenly your heart is beating rapidly. And you're starting to worry about whether or not you're going to choke on it.
Right.
That's a disorder.
Right. So main causes of anxiety, I guess, in today's generation is uncertainty about the future, for sure. What the culture propagates, what the society propagates, I guess those might be the same thing. Big Pharma, that is also another one. And also the competitive nature of it all.
And media. Don't forget that one that we discussed.
And what I mean by competitive nature of it all, I mean that you feel bad if you see another student or another person who seems like they're getting along well with everything in their life, and they're doing less than you are, that they're studying less, that they're going to work less. I mean, those are the circumstances. Life is not a fair game. People all have their different circumstances, and it has to be a matter of acceptance about you just might have to put in more work than another person over your lifetime. It just might have to happen.
Yeah.
So, anything you would like to add onto that? I think
that's about it, really. I just like to end this by saying that everything that we spoke about today is solely not hypothetical. It's a hypothesis. There's no conclusions drawn from this. This is our take on things, what we think, and we're just really experimenting with thought. And we hope that you can perhaps get some of these ideas, expand on them on your own time. And it's really just to open up conversation about these issues. It's not a seal of approval on anything like that. So, is there anything you wanted to...
Yeah, just another closing statement is that a lot of the stuff that we're saying, a lot of this subject in particular is a very difficult subject to talk about. I have friends that I personally know who struggle with this, I mean, I can't fully place myself in their shoes because, you know, I don't know. I don't know all the circumstances they've been through. Another thing is, it's like me and Carter, we're just like we've done a lot of studying on certain subjects that normally people at our age don't normally find an interest in, and that has led us to develop different modes of thought and stuff. And we're kind of putting these thoughts and hypotheses, theories forward so that you question these things and you just don't take them at face value, because there are a lot of hidden forces at play with many things that are going on in the world, and it's just something important to keep in mind, I guess.
Like I said, opening up a conversation on the issue rather than keeping silent about it and just accepting the narrative that is currently, you know, questioning the current mantra of anxiety.
Yeah, the current narrative that's being pushed for. Right. Yeah. Okay, well, so this was another episode of Hammercircuit. I hope you found it
fun,
interesting, maybe thought-provoking at the very least. I'm Michael.
I'm Carter.
Hope you guys have a nice anxiety-free day. Okay, I have all right.